Maybe. Hi, Commissioner Esposito.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing? Hey,
All
Emily.
right. Someone said you're traveling. Where are you for work these days?
I am in Austin this week, just for a short little work trip with one of my clients.
Well, I hope it is life-giving in the midst of everything else.
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Policy Committee Chair, Ashley Esposito. I'd like to welcome you all to the February 18th meeting for the Policy Committee. If you have not done so, please mute your phones, and anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. Additionally, if you're not a board member, the CEO or her staff, please turn off your video. And I will now read a roll call to identify who's on the call, and please identify yourself first before speaking on the record. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Ames Messenger present.
Welcome. Commissioner Redding Lounger. Commissioner Rooks. Commissioner Sally.
Commissioner Sally present.
Awesome. Welcome. And so today we have two policies that we're going to be reviewing. Let me see. Just pull it up really quick. We're going to be looking at policy JKA, behavioral interventions and student discipline, and policy BDB, board officers and BDD board committees. We will also receive some general updates and public comment if we have any. Do we have someone here to present for policy JKA, behavioral interventions and student discipline? Welcome.
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. 1 second, Ms. Hines is coming. She's going to use my computer. Hello, everyone. Sorry, my computer, I don't have internet connection. It just dropped off. I was the first person on the call, but it just dropped. Sorry. So I came
Oh, no
over to
worries.
Dr. Williams' computer. Yep, are we ready?
Yep, we're ready.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, you can take my computer, sorry. This afternoon, myself and Denise Mabry from the Office of Special Education will be presenting to you on today in regards to updates to Board Policy JKA, which is the Behavioral Interventions and Student Discipline Policy. Next slide, please. So just some of the key features to begin of Board Policy JKA. It's the policy, which is JKA, and then it has several regulations that accompany it. And so the regulations that you see are here. They are JKRA through RE. The ones that you see that are notated with an asterisk, those are the sections which are JKARA and JKARB. Those are the ones that we are proposing changes to in those two regulations. Next slide, please. So just the main purpose that we're doing the revisions, we want to align with recent changes that have been made to COMAR. And those changes have been made that affect things within the special education office, such as exclusion, physical restraint, and also in our schools office, such as reportable offenses. We also want to clarify the appeals process for our in-school suspensions. So currently in our JKA policy, there are very detailed procedures around out of school suspensions and that appeal process. So we also wanted to include what the process is around in-school suspensions, because that is not currently in the policy. And then we also wanted to clarify how we, when I say we, City Schools responds when we are notified of a reportable offense. So that is the purpose of our revisions for this policy. Next slide, please. And so at this time, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Mabry, and she is going to tell you around the special education department changes that are regarding JKA.
Thank you, Lloyd Hines. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for my voice not being as it should. So I'm Denise Mabry. I am the Director of Compliance and Due Process in the Office of Special Education. So just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the updates that we in Office of Special Education made around restraints. So we're requiring that all schools have at least 2 to 4 staff be trained in CPI. At least 1 administrator must be included on the school-based behavior response team. And this is a staff we're talking about to be trained in CPI, Crisis Prevention Institute. Increased frequency of our crisis intervention training sessions. So again, to allow more schools to be trained, we have increased additional trainings for our school-based staff. And restraint regulations and reporting process is included in all CPI training. So something we started this year was prior to any training around CPI. We also talk about the restraint process, share the documentation that schools have to complete if a restraint is provided during the school to a student, excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay, some proposed changes for the definitions. As identifying COMAR, update definitions to the following terms. We added, included section 504, behavior intervention plan, or BIP, mechanical restraint, physical restraint, positive behavior interventions and supports, and serious bodily injuries. So these are revisions that were required by COMAR, and so we're updating our policy to reflect these definitions. Next slide, please. The proposed change to exclusions, but as identified in COMAR, requirements for what school staff must do during a period of exclusions. Exclusion is the removal of a student to a non-locked supervised area for a limited period of time, during which the student has opportunity to regain self-control and is not receiving instruction, including special education, related services, or supports. So now staff must provide support to increase the student's self-regulation in order to return to an instructional setting, act consistent with evidence-based trauma-informed crisis prevention intervention program. And again, these revisions were required by COMAR. Next slide, please. And these are the proposed changes to physical restraints, extend guidelines on physical restraints to students with Section 504 plans. Previous language only referenced students with IEP or BIPS, so now we're including students Section 504 plans in the regulation. Includes new deadlines regarding notice of physical restraint. So parents must be notified within 24 hours of use of restraints. Schools have 4 business days after a student's 10th incident of a restraint to provide notice to the Office of Special Education. And this is done by completing that online form that we provide to all schools. And MSDE, Office of Special Education, we have 10 business days after notice of physical restraint to provide recommendations to MSDE and notifying the schools. So we follow MSDE after every 10th incident of a restraint. Updated language about when update language about when physical restraint is removed when a student no longer poses a threat or imminent, seriously physical harm. And it clarifies how schools should debrief restraint incidents to prevent future incidents and improve response to the student challenging behavior. So again, all of these are required by changes as identified in COMAR. Next one. And I will turn it back over to Ms. Hines. You are mute, Lloyd.
Sorry. So as we proceed, I just want to provide a few updates around student discipline and what we have done before proposing these changes. So as we all know, our disciplinary responses, we are very restorative. We use restorative methods. We use intervention strategies, and we only issue suspensions as a measure of a last resort. So that is not our first. We don't just immediately go to suspension, even though there are varied levels. That again is our last resort. We made extensive revisions to our student code of conduct during the summer of 2023. And they were made based on, we had several focus groups. Dr. S had several focus groups with the principals and administrators of schools. And what we heard was that there needed to be, they needed to be able to provide some more responses to disciplinary things that were happening in their school to maintain their buildings to be safe. And so as a result of that, we updated our code of conduct beginning in the year of 23, school year 23-24. We also did intense training, professional development sessions that was mandatory for all administrators on how to use and the updates regarding the code of conduct before we came back. And so it was in the Leadership Institute, the Operations Institute in August of 2023 as well. Next slide, please. So some of the proposed changes around reportable offenses. So there have been changes in the state regarding how reportable offenses are to be reported and what you do with a reportable offense once it's reported, how we respond to that. And so what we have done in the school's office is there has been in conjunction with the legal office, there is a process that now takes place when we are given reportable offenses, when they're reported to us. And so the first thing that happens is there's a meeting that happens at the school level to determine if that student actually poses a safety risk. And then if the student does pose a safety risk, then a safety plan must be developed at that meeting. It is also determined whether or not that student should be removed from their school setting, their traditional school setting, in that environment. And that would only happen if that student poses an imminent threat of serious harm based upon the action that they did. There's additional requirements if a student is arrested for rape or a sexual offense, and that alleged student attends the same school as the victim in the incident. And then also, just like as any other appeals process, the student or their family can appeal the safety plan or the determination, if it is made, that that student has to be removed from that school. And all of this language, again, is aligned with COMAR. And so that is the reason that we are proposing the changes so that our policy and regulations can be in alignment with COMAR. Next slide, please. So here are the proposed changes to JKA around, this is JKA-RB, the regulation around student suspension and expulsion. So we are just, again, as I stated before, adding language to, not even to clarify, to just say what the appeals process would be in the case of an in-school suspension. Because again, it is already clearly stated for out-of-school suspensions. And so we just want to have an appeals process if a parent or family chooses to appeal if their student is given an in-school suspension. So we have that appeal process. A parent or guardian can appeal to the chief of school's office within 10 days of the suspension. And then the principal supervisor, which is called our ILEDs, they act as the CEO's designee, and they must give a written decision within 5 days of receiving the appeal. Okay. And then in alignment with board policy BLA, if they are not in agreement with the ILED's decision, then they can appeal that decision within 30 days to the board in alignment with the board policy BLA. Okay. Next slide, please. In JKA-RB, it also adds language that clarifies the process for school staff if they are not in agreement with a decision that is made, like when they have to call in a long-term or an extended suspension. If they are not in agreement with the recommendation from that office, then they can elevate that matter for further review by the chief of school or their designee. And so that is another proposed change that we have added to that regulation. So for the engagement plan, this is a tier 2 policy. And so we would solicit written feedback and have meetings upon requests with the community stakeholders that you see here. Yes, I'm sorry. So I don't want to read all of the community stakeholders, but we always ask for written feedback, and they can provide that written feedback. And then sometimes they request us to come and like speak at, some of their like community meetings, and we're happy to do that as well. Next slide. And so this is just the timeline for the revisions for this policy. And so today, of course, we are presenting it to the policy committee. And then on April the 22nd, it will go to the board for first reader. And then June the 2nd, it will go to the board for second reader. Next slide. And that is the end. If there are any questions or comments that you have at this time, I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you. I do have a quick question. So if a suspension does happen and they give a suspension date, like say it's within 2 days of the incident, the appeal, is that typical that it's pretty immediately after? Because the appeal process could extend to 15 days. So I'm wondering like how would they prevent suspension?
Yeah, so it wouldn't prevent a suspension. So if the appeal process is if a suspension has already happened. And so a suspension is not given to the student until that student receives due process. And sometimes there's an investigation that, is ongoing. So that student wouldn't be given a suspension until that investigation is over and they're actually given due process and given the suspension paperwork. That is when the suspension would start. And so when they're given their due process, which includes giving them that paperwork to say you are suspended, this is the reason you're suspended, so on and so forth, they have the amount of days from that time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yes.
Do I have any questions from my colleagues?
I do have a question. It's more a question about what, if you could let me know what you think mostly happens in practice. Is rather, I'm curious about what's happening in practice as opposed to what's in the policy here around physical restraint. So the new deadline is parents notify within 24 hours of the use of a restraint. I mean, when I was working in schools, it would be uncommon for parents not to be notified almost immediately if restraint was used on a child. Is that what you find is typically happening? Is this is just like a backstop? What happens in practice usually? You know, are we waiting a full 24 hours to let parents know that their child has been restrained?
No, so in practice, we've always utilized the caution of contacting parents immediately. So once a student is restrained, they'll be seen by a nurse within the school, and then a nurse is to contact the parent immediately to say, hey, Denise, was restrained. This is the reason why. I looked at Denise. There are no concerns, no bruises, no injuries, but we want to inform you as well, and you will be getting documentation as to what occurred. So we advise schools on trainers to do it immediately. And the 24 hours, even though it's currently in the language, we've always used that in Baltimore City schools as well. So if we try to contact you immediately, continue to contact the parent as soon as possible, but definitely within 24 hours.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then it seems like, and I apologize for being late, so this is my fault if you said this in person already. It seems like almost all of the proposed changes are driven by COMAR and coming into alignment with COMAR, or things that we intended to have in previous versions of a policy revision. Is that accurate, or is there anything in here that's
No,
that's outside
that
of
is
that?
correct. The reason that we
Okay.
opened this policy up and we're making changes is because there were several changes that were made in COMAR, and we just wanted our policies to be in alignment with COMAR. So that was the main reason. And then once we had it open, the little thing like the in-school suspension appeal process, we just realized we didn't have that. So while we have it open, we just want to add that in.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Sally?
Yep. A question I had is around training in terms of, I'm sorry if I missed this in the presentation. I'm traveling, so I don't have the full presentation in front of me. But with training, I'm concerned that, there's just a wide number of stakeholders inside of city schools that are going to need some support with revisions and updates to their own kind of practice. Can you describe what you envision the dissemination plan across city schools once this goes into effect?
Sure. So when we have updates, there is communication that's called the leadership update. So we always put those changes within the leadership update, and that's like a daily kind of bulletin that the administrators have. That is one way. And then when we have our mass professional development, which happens in the summer, we do intense training for administrators there, which is mandatory for all administrators. And then for the suspension side of things, we have open office hours. So if there are any questions around suspensions or changes or whatever, just like processes that administrators need, we have that open time where they can just pop in on Friday. So this office is the Office of Student Conduct and Attendance. So we have it both for the attendance side, which is very well attended each week. And then we also have it as well, like I said, for the suspension side on Fridays. And so we give any updates, at that time. But if there are administrators who need, specific, help on something, we can help them at that time as well.
And I also just add the monthly updates to school leaders so when we have a change in policy, we want to make sure that people not only are reading it in the leadership updates, but we do some slides when we have all of the principals, both traditional and charter, since they all follow these policies. So we do that monthly as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have one more question, if time permits, Chair.
Yes.
And this may actually just be a request for follow-up rather than a question for today's audience, but it's related, so I wanted to bring it up. It's not about the changes that you've presented today, but rather just a question about a particular section of the administrative regulation around student suspension and expulsion. and this is anecdotal. I've heard this as I've been visiting schools around city schools. There is, and I want to preface this by saying, I generally do not believe in suspension or expulsion for children in grades pre-K to 2. I know we have very specific regulations and procedures around that, but I have heard on more than one occasion, a sense that certain schools are not able to adequately support students with repeated behavioral infractions in those grades who would otherwise potentially be sent home if they were older, for instance. And so I want to dig in just a little bit to understand, what we can offer, what supports exist at the school level, but more importantly at the district level. How are we supporting schools that are feeling a little bit sort of hamstrung by the regulations? But I think more importantly, because a lot of the research would tell you sending a first grader home is not going to, necessarily change the behavior. But our response can't be, staff deal with what are sort of objectively unacceptable behaviors on a regular basis. They either need the skill or the training or specialized programs to be able to support those students and support the broader environment. And so I just want to dig in and understand more what we're able to do from a district level. So I don't think it's the focus of today's presentation and meeting. I know it's not the focus of it, but I wanted to bring it up because I think it's related to the broader policy. And so I would love to ask for an opportunity to have a meeting about that specific topic with either one of you or the most appropriate person to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, can I briefly respond, Commissioner Esposito?
Please.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. So when you said you would like to have a meeting with either of us, it would be apropos to have it with actually both of us, because you are correct. It's not just a regulation. That's Maryland state law that prohibits suspensions in that grade band, pre-K through 2. And so
please know I'm not advocating. Please
right,
understand
no,
that I'm
right. I
I'm not
understand. You just want to know like what supports, because we can't do
Right,
it.
exactly.
So what we have done, because they can't do out of school suspensions, but like if sometimes there is a consequence that's needed to kind of get the point across. And so if it is a consequence that is needed, they are able to do in-school suspensions. They must follow the regulations, but they don't have to get like prior approval. That is considered a level 2 response. And so they are able to give an in-school suspension, but it's apropos for both offices because we work very closely. There's a staff member, her name is Miss Ernestine Holly, and she works with that grade band of students who the schools are having challenges with, but we know that we cannot suspend them. So whenever there's a school that is requesting a suspension for that grade band, I will contact Miss Holly, and then Miss Holly and I will then have a meeting like with that principal, that administrator, so that we can kind of come up with supports. 9 times out of 10, Miss Holly will actually go to the school to observe that student and then help them to come up with a plan. In some of the instances, there has been like an emergency aid there, for the student to sit with the student. We'll get an emergency aid. That has happened many times, but if that is not able to be done, there are strategies that when she leaves, the school is left with, how they can support that student that is having those challenging behaviors in that grade band.
I really appreciate that, and I would like to dig into it some more again, because it's one of those things where if you as a school or a staff member who's responsible for responding to this on a regular basis, you feel like you're dealing with this day in, day out, and you have no recourse. It's exhausting, right? We are burning folks out, and I think more importantly, it's exhausting because you want to support this child who's having some major issues, and you don't feel like you have the tools you need to support it, and it just has a big impact on the school community. And I'm just worried that either folks don't know of some of the supports that are out there that are available, but that we're really burning some folks out, and their attention is being diverted from supporting other students, supporting that student in the way in which they need to be supported, because of how exhausting of a task this is, particularly when you feel like your options are so limited, you don't know where to go. So, I mean, I can hear in your response, you have a commitment to being a partner in solving this. I just want to give voice to those folks who are feeling really, really burnt out in this situation. And for those students who are not getting what they need. I mean, if you're if you're, exhibiting some of these extreme behaviors on a day-to-day basis, it means you're not in class learning. And it means other kids probably aren't learning either.
Yeah.
So we need to figure something out. So I would really welcome a follow-up meeting and maybe then I can be a little bit more specific.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and can I also be included in that? Because in you raising that, I realized that that's also the grade band that falls into the ages that are most impacted by not having a diagnosis or being waitlisted. So they would fall into that gray area of students that may be suspected to have a disability but don't have an actual like diagnosis yet, or an IEP, or ways to navigate that. So yeah, I would like to be included just from that perspective. And Commissioner Ames Messenger, I see you have a question.
I say I would also like to be added to that meeting. I know we're getting close to our and I think partially just I do want to flag, you as a small team have been given a truly Herculean, when you're talking about attendance and discipline in post-COVID lives, this is, and so many things we're talking about. What are the academic implications, staff retention, so many things. This is hard work. I think specifically kind of in that space, I'm looking for follow-up. I'm interested in the use of in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension and how the numbers track with that across grade bands, and looking at kind of so I don't know if that's coming to us in a report soon, or if that's something that we could just pull some rough data and look at. And then also looking at how that tracks with transfers, because even both in and out of the district, but especially in between schools, that, if we do have these high flyer kids that are moving throughout the district, what are the patterns and supports that we're providing to schools for students that are having a hard time having needs met, and that's not just becoming a systems problem as it moves through the district. So I guess for follow-up, a meeting would be wonderful. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And then specifically looking at what does that look like as an intervention level? And then what are the actual data that we're pulling in terms of suspension, types of suspensions, and the supports that are given, broken down for IEP, student 504, students with disabilities, transfer status, et cetera, language.
Any other questions? Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all for that. And I look forward to having a follow-up with all of us.
Thank you.
Thank
Should
you.
I reach out to you, Commissioner Esposito, or how can we set that meeting up?
Yes, you can reach out to me and Dr. Judkins.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you
so
all
much.
for your work.
Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
is a lot. We don't mean this is you. You've been tasked with a huge task. So thank you.
And next we have policy BDB and BDD. This is board officers and board committees.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for projecting. Okay, hello, I'm Dr. Jennifer Judkins. I'm the Board Executive Officer for the Board of School Commissioners, and I'm presenting updates to policy BDB, board officers, and BDD, board committees. Next slide. These policies relate directly to board priorities 3, supporting the success of students, educators, administrators, and staff, as well as priority 7, implementing policies, practices, and procedures. Next slide, thanks. The primary purpose of revision to board policy BDB, board officers, is to convert the remaining board rules into policies and incorporate active board rules into the existing policies. These revisions are being proposed to incorporate Board Rule 202.05. So Board Rule 202.05, the primary board rule described my position, which is the board executive. I serve as the board's administrative officer, and I operate as a liaison between the CEO's office and the board. The board appoints this position, and I report directly to the board. Slide. Additional revisions to this policy are to give the opportunity for board members to provide feedback on the operations of the board that are consistent with board policy BBA, which is the board powers, responsibilities, and professional standards. And the primary purpose of revisions to board policy BDD, board committees, is to establish the Safety and Wholeness Committee and the Strategic Planning Committee as standing committees. Currently, they're listed as ad hoc. However, because these committees are ongoing, they should be added to our standing committees. So the goals of the Safety and Wholeness Committee are to engage the district personnel and stakeholders to develop a comprehensive roadmap to enhance safety standards and services for students and staff, as well as to leverage the guidance and resources from federal, state, and local levels, incorporating cultural, restorative, and healing-centered approaches within our student wholeness initiatives. Summarizing some of the work from school year 23-24, there was a review of policy ADF, which was wellness, nutrition, and physical activity. There was also a review of school safety and of the prolonged state of emergency plan. There was analysis of continuous improvement with a focus on attendance, as well as a review of the safety plan updates, and key partnerships with the school systems were highlighted during the meetings. And for strategic planning, the goals are to collaborate with the CEO and city school staff to develop student outcome focused district goals and to monitor the progress towards these goals. Highlights from the 23-24 school year for this committee were monitoring progress towards the board's strategic priorities, the review and refinement of district goals, and monitoring implementation of the goals. And then additional revisions to policy BDD are to clarify that board members will be appointed annually to serve on standing committees, and to explain that the board chair appoints members to standing committees and announces committee charges by the start of the school year, and to highlight that when a vacancy on a committee occurs and when new members are appointed or elected to the board, that the board chair will then notify board members and provide an opportunity for them to express interest in serving on those committees. This was a tier 1 stakeholder engagement, which is a minor update, technical change, or change to incorporate the board rule. So this will be posted on the City Schools website for public feedback and draft revisions shared with key stakeholders, which include the groups listed. And the timeline, we're presenting obviously to policy committee today. First reader will be on April 22nd and second reader on June 10th. Any questions?
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Commissioner Redding-Lowen.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Judkins, for that. And I appreciate the desire to codify these in board policy and regulations. There have been a number of changes discussed with leadership and with the broader board to the Strategic Planning Committee, and these don't reflect those. So will this be updated to reflect both, the proposed name change and then also the objectives or goals of the committee? I forget how it was phrased here.
Yeah, let's update those. And I kind of had that question on here. So we're presenting here today, but again, we don't take it to first reader until April 22nd. So yeah, let's do that between now and that time.
Okay, great.
Yep.
I'm happy to collaborate. If you need anything from me on that, I just want to make sure if we're taking the time to do this, we might as well.
Yeah, I thought the same
it.
thing. So yes,
Okay.
and we definitely will need to collaborate.
Okay, I'm here and ready and able. Then just a couple of technical questions. So are there any implications about moving from ad hoc to standing other than just the frequency of meeting, or like, does that carry any implications with it that we may not be considering?
Well, officially ad hoc committees aren't supposed to last more than 6 months. So both of these committees have lasted longer than that. So as a result, we need to move them into standing committees because they no longer fit into the definition of ad hoc.
Makes total sense. What, and sorry, this is the last question. I see the Chair Sally's hand. What consideration goes into whether or not a committee is one that meets publicly versus one that does not have public meetings?
Yeah, and feel free for others to jump in, but in general, yeah, it just depends on the topics that are being discussed. If there are ones that have certain implications that are more like internal, yeah, thanks, Josh. You probably can describe it better, but there are reasons why we do some public and some closed. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah.
Dr. Judkins, you were doing a great job. I was just coming on if you're backup, but no need to add much except for to say that it's governed by the Open Meeting Act and the specific topics that can be discussed in open versus closed meetings. Obviously, the goal is to err on the side of open and public engagement in the process. And we have been also looking at all of our committees to make sure that we are making as much of them public as we can.
Great. And so maybe it's something for us to just think about and consider as we are updating this particular policy. But it sounds to me like the goal is actually to have every committee meeting be open, with the understanding that some committees more frequently than others deal with matters that are appropriate for closed for executive session.
Yes, and then they go into closed session.
Okay. All right. Just something to consider for us behind the scenes. Thank you.
Commissioner Sally?
Thank you so much. So one thing I want to, this is just for all of us to think about. This may not be a specific reply from Dr. Judkins, but rather, there are opportunities for us to enhance our governance work, right? So what we're talking about here of moving more committees from ad hoc into standing, expands the board's kind of formal structure. That is something I think the board will need to wrestle with in terms of how we want to manage the work of the entire board. So is it that we want to, so we are expanding, this action right here would expand the number of committees that we have. And more work is going to be done in that way, in that respect, versus a slimmer committee structure. And so as you're developing this policy, I think there's going to need to be some ways in which we're talking about the way in which business is done by the board and how do we want to do that. So like there's more framing to this presentation where the board, I think, is going to have to weigh in and put up just various ways in which if we don't have it as a standing committee, how else when then therefore would the work get done? Could the work be done through other committees? Could it be done through more in the open business of the meetings, X, Y, and Z? And so just something for us to think about. So I know we've talked a little bit about in spaces and places before, is this the most efficient and effective way for the board to do its work? And I know there's different organizations out there that have different recommendations on how we proceed.
Good note.
And I'd like to see some pluses and minuses of like kind of it as you're building this out in terms of like the board to consider, because I think this might be just helpful. And we're talking about two specific committees here in isolation, but rather, all of the committees might be worthwhile for the board to have a conversation and dialogue about.
Good note. Yep. Yeah. Other questions or comments?
I have a question about the Safety and Wholeness Committee. I know it's a newer committee, but so some of the things that are on there that are the summary of their past or of the past work that we've been doing. I'm wondering like if some of these actually make more sense to be under the scope of work for the stakeholders and like recognized groups to be doing those evaluations.
Is that something you'd like to discuss as a board?
Yeah, I think it kind of ties into like what Commissioner Sally's saying about like if we do the model of like how all of the committees operate, it would definitely change the scope of work and what that committee is actually working on. And also, I think it would also change like which key partners we highlight.
Right.
And I'm sending like a follow-up email about the way that folks like submit to be recognized in those meetings. Any other questions? Commissioner Ings Messenger?
I would say I won't belabor the point of just affirming what everyone has said, that I agree. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Commissioner Sally?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's hard to do this on your phone. It also, this has been brought up before in terms of like recognized groups. This may not be the right policy, but it is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're also looking at broader sets of definitions that need to be fine-tuned with recognized groups and things like that. So if we're going to open this up, I think it might be worthwhile taking a pass through a couple of different sectors that will be helpful for the board to consider.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. And do we have any public comment today?
We do not.
Okay. Awesome.
Commissioner Esposito, I think we have another presentation on the general orders.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Yes. Yes, feel free to present that. Thank you.
I believe Chief Shorter is coming on to present.
Yes, I'm on. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's the end of the day. You all can smile. This won't be long. This be real painless, I promise. All right, so today we're going to go over the 12 general orders that were reviewed and requested for revision. Overview of the proposed revisions will be guided by Administrative Regulation ECAE-RA. And the 2025 general orders review resulted in the 12 prioritized general orders, all of which can be found on School Police and the City Schools website. The review and requested revisions are part of my plan to ensure school police are compliant with federal, state, local laws, board policies, best practice in law enforcement, and include minor recommendations based on the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. All right, Jonathan, you can go ahead. The board strategy that the policy we align with are all of them, but in particular, priority 4 and 5, for which the school police will engage all stakeholders in a manner that will contribute to student success. And 5, school police will provide equal access to all services and resources to build relational equity. Next one. The mission statement is basically to create and maintain a safe learning environment accomplished by developing positive relationships and delivering high quality professional police services with equity and impartiality. Next one. School police operate from a stance of support to our students, administrators, and overall school community by ensuring that we are giving administrators the opportunity to resolve issues that could be de-escalated, but also able to serve if that is not the case. The mission alignment is done by reinforcement with training, ensuring that most serious situations are resolved by school administrators through various methods to include diversion programs, and creating and engaging in positive community events. The next one. These policies are part of a broader school safety strategy that includes physical building security, emotional safety, and people that support safety, which is everyone. Next one. The core principles of professionalism, transparency, and accountability. This will be adhered to by proper and consistent implementation of general orders. Next one. The first order up, you can skip that one. I already did that one first. First general order up is 10-04, which is organizational structure. And this updated the organizational structure of the school police to be consistent with current operational and staffing needs. And it clarifies the functions and roles of the newly created operation and administrative divisions, including the sections and units of each. The focus of the operation division is on the physical operation of school police. An administrative division focuses on the policies, procedures, compliance, and administrative functions of school police. The next slide delineates the organizational chart and a breakdown of who falls in line with what specific commander. And that should be next slide. The next revision is General Order 1005, which is command, supervising, and direction. This general order replaced the word captain as second in command with police major, and it updates the duties and responsibilities of acting chief and what they can or can't, what he or she can or cannot do or will be expected to do. The next one, General Order 1012, Department of Vehicles. It adds a new section regarding take-home vehicles, and it delineates who can issue take-home vehicles, who is entitled to a take-home vehicle, and the issuance of such these vehicles are based on the ability to respond for emergency calls and other law enforcement related functions, and these officers or commanders who receive these vehicles are on call. Clarifies the responsibility of the member and the member who is issued a take-home vehicle, such as the responsibility to pay for parking tickets if it's fines. General maintenance falls within line with the school system, but if anything that happens in a personal nature, the officer or person assigned a vehicle is responsible for those things. Next one, General Order 1039, nepotism and fraternization. It's updated to fully align with board policy GB-EBA and GB-EBA-RA. It added language to strictly prohibit dating or romantic and sexual relationships between the supervisor and the subordinate, which is direct supervision, by including a new definition for immediate supervisory chain, dating, and or romantic sexual relationship. And it prohibits discrimination in favor of or against applicants because they are immediate family members of a board member. The next one. Secondary employment, General Order 1041, clarifies rules and procedures for secondary employment, and it clarifies the relationship between overtime and secondary employment where previously there was some disconnect. Next General Order. General Order 1043, vacation, personal, and holiday leave, is updated to align with the FOP provision that a supervisor may request verifiable documentation if an illness lasts more than 2 days versus the 3 days that was the old policy. Two consecutive days in accordance with the Maryland Healthy Work and Families Act and City Employees Handbook. It also updated the type of holiday leave to include President's Day, which we all celebrated yesterday, and Juneteenth, which is consistent with the school calendar. Next one. General Order 1044, which is a medical policy. It clarifies the protocols for fitness for duty and other medical exams to determine whether a school police officer is able to safely and effectively perform his job, and also aligns with board policy and administrative regulations when an employee's prolonged or repeated absence because of illnesses or personal reasons. Next one, General Order 1053 is also an added piece, which is light duty. It clarifies what light duty is, and it also provides that eligible personnel have a reasonable opportunity to work in temporary status, light duty status, consistent with this general order. And it has a protocol for no permanent light duty or limited duty positions, which means it's not forever. And the members also talks about members on light duty status may not work secondary employment or be scheduled for an overtime assignment that will require the use of police powers without prior approval. Officers in light duty will also be required to submit to periodic physical assessments by the city school physician and or their health provider. 1056, overtime. It prioritizes the deployment of members working regularly scheduled shifts to meet operational needs before utilizing overtime. It also puts a cap on the amount of hours that an overtime officer can work to improve awareness and reduce fatigue or reduce liability. It updates procedures to ensure that all overtime is requested and processed through the school police online systems. Requires the supervisor to approve overtime usage for secondary employment opportunities. Next slide. This is the key to it. Adds new definition, clarity, and distinction between the type of overtime that can be worked or identified. Non-operational versus operational. Non-operational is work performed by school police officers outside of regularly scheduled shifts, with a little more added to it. And operational is work performed by school police employees outside of regularly scheduled shifts to fulfill safety needs based on the security of city schools community on emergency-based request for an outside law enforcement or government agency. Next one. General Order 13-4, internal investigation, updates the language to accurately reflect school police organizational chart. And allows the chief of school to authorize joint investigations through various internal and external stakeholders. It clarifies protocol for statements during internal investigations, such as the officer may review his body-worn camera footage prior to giving a written or video statement. Next one. General Order 13-17, search and seizure, which the focus on this one was wellness checks. It clarifies and updates requirements for school police officers to conduct a welfare check at a student's home or employee's home. It shall be conducted in a lawful and professional manner. It allows officers to conduct wellness checks to be accompanied by other city school staff, such as social work or other mental health providers. General Order 18-1801, which is community relations. It's the newly established community relations unit, and it was formulated to build strong relationships of mutual trust between school police and all school communities as a critical component of maintaining public safety, which will go to the second or third grader who has some kind of behavioral issues. You know, if the principal said to us, hey, I have this issue, can you come have your community resource officer talk to the student? Maybe it's something that we can do as part of another resource for the school to help resolve that, whatever kind of issue that the kid has. It undertakes and organize non-law enforcement agencies engagement activities for both positive community relations, including intervention and prevention by mentoring, coaching, and other activities. As stated in the previous slides and presentations, this is Tier 1 stakeholder engagement, consultation with the various agencies and stakeholders listed on this particular slide. And it's posted to the city schools website. That's my presentation. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, so I'll take them.
Any questions?
I'll start with an easy one.
Okay.
And thank you, Chief Shorter, for the presentation. Very informative. There's a lot there, a lot to digest. I mean, I know I appreciate the version you gave, just saying what each update does, but I haven't had time to dig into the details of all of it, nor probably will I for each of them. But I do have an easy question, which is, when does this come before the board? I mean, I'm assuming this is going to go to first reader and then it's going to come to the board to vote on. Can you just give us a sense of the timeline?
I don't have the agenda for the timeline in front of me. But the first reader is going to go with the first reader. And where's the schedule? First reader, second reader, and then whatever the normal progression of after the public comment section, and then the board will get it at for final vote. So I guess within the next 60 to 90 days, is that correct, Josh?
And I see
Okay.
Jonathan raised, so I don't know if he has an exact date.
Thanks, Mr. Esposito. Yeah, I was just going to say the update to the general orders goes to first reader in May, so May 13th. And second reader is currently scheduled for July 22nd.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Sally?
Thank you, Commissioner Esposito. So, and I appreciate you shorter all of this information here. There is a lot here within the order update. And I always think about implementation in terms of like both, you know, what our stakeholders are going to voice to us in terms of how they are interacting, you know, with our school resource officers and other folks. That's one. So I will be looking forward to seeing what comes out of that feedback. And two is thinking about just the ongoing nature of ensuring that not just compliance, but ensuring that folks have the resources and support that they need in these roles to successfully implement anything in service of our young people. So more of a comment and a signaling of what I'd like to see in a future presentation in terms of what you think the implementation plan is with just the breadth of everything that you shared today.
Okay.
And this is Josh Seven, Chief Legal Officer, just chiming in, Chair Sally. I think wanted to highlight, because he's humble and not tooting his own horn, so trying to do that for him. These revisions are really the product of Chief Shorter's coming in, identifying areas where we can spruce up, and just committed to doing, in addition to all the implementation work, also the policy work to make sure that we're aligned with best practices, engaging with the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, on this as well. So these are pieces that are part of the every 2-year review, but are also some of the nuts and bolts of making sure that we have the right policies in place to support the excellent police work of our team.
Awesome, thank you.
And I saw Chief Plaistow say, did you have something there? Okay.
Yeah, just in case.
Okay. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Me.
Sorry, Stefan, do you want to go first? I'm still cooking.
Sure. I mean, mine was more of a comment. I was just going to say, and I hope this didn't get lost in the first comment. Appreciate Chief Sivan chiming in. Most of what I see here seems like it's an upgrade and an improvement, and I really appreciate the hard work that has gone into it. My comment was more, I need to do my homework to understand when it says clarifies X, Y, and Z. I want to go and read to see what it clarifies. And part of it is also, as a new board member, I don't know what was there before. You know, like I don't know how vehicles were assigned or not assigned before. And I can only read between the lines in terms of, you know, language around clarifying, you know, getting approval for overtime and those types of things. It makes me assume there was not clear language before. So I do want to just make sure that I'm clear in my tone on this, which is this is very much appreciated because it's so detailed and it's so thorough. I just want to go ahead and make sure I'm getting into the weeds on it and I'm understanding some of the context behind it. But very much appreciate your attention to the detail here, Chief, and have just appreciated your work since you've joined us.
Thank you. Most of these general orders had not been updated since 2018. So that's a long time. A lot has happened since 2018. And just ensuring that we all, you know, in the right frame of mind, doing the right thing. We've had a few instances that we've had to overcome. And I just want to make sure that we don't have those instances anymore. And as Josh talked about, to clearly define and identify best practices to make sure that we because we are the only school police agency in the state of Maryland. All right. So we want to make sure that we do the right thing and we are a model of if someone else wants to create a school police force, that they will come to us as a guide to what they would need to do to move forward in such an agency.
I really appreciate that as a standard to set for ourselves. So I appreciate you saying that.
I think building on that is just like emphasizing like the challenging space and that where that positions us with the rest of the state in terms of expectations and kind of legally what happens for us, that we do have a very unique set of challenges. So thank you for spearheading that and all the headaches it causes. I think the second thing, and again, needing some additional time to chew, is I am new. I appreciate a lot of the intentionality around language and that and working with students, and like a lot of that is how we call things and structure things matter. I think building on that, I am curious, just kind of as you bring this back, looking especially with older students that have personal experience with these interactions and getting to talk with some of your officers who have had very positive interactions with students. But I would just be interested in kind of some of the community feedback that you've had as these changes have begun to evolve. You know, while that doesn't have input in the typical channels, I would be curious about what the community response has been to these changes thus far.
We've had some with one community group, and we will try to get you back the information that they had. They were very, I'm not gonna say instrumental, but very important in our least recent policy with the body worn camera. So we took a lot of what they said into consideration. And Dr. Tosay has led the charge in these meetings with them. You know, some have been challenging for me, I would say. And she's been able to collaborate those meetings to make sure we all on the same page, respectfully communicating and just getting to the place where we all can be happy with the product.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, both of you.
Any more questions from anyone? Okay, seeing none. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Comment today. Let's see. Looks like that's the end of our agenda. So our next meeting is going to be March 18th from 4 till 5:30. And if anyone is interested in public comment, members of the public who would like to provide public comment to the committee, the policy committee can do so by signing up at 9 a.m. the Thursday before the meeting up until 5 p.m. the Monday right before the meeting. Individuals and groups interested in providing public comments may do so by signing up one of three ways. They can contact the board office at 443-642-4095, visit the board office in person at 200 North Avenue, or email the board office at schoolboard@bcps.k12.md.us. We have space for 5 individuals to provide public comment to the policy committee. Each speaker will be granted 3 minutes. And all public comments should address the policy related issues that we have on that agenda for that day. Sign up will not be permitted on the day of the meeting. And for information regarding the policy committee, please visit the board section on the city schools website under the policy section. And we also, I just want to mention, we also have a policy feedback form. So if there is any policy that you see that we're going to be discussing and you're not able to make it or can't sign up for public comment, you can always give us feedback through that forum. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Tie. I'll take both your seconds. Yeah. Thank you all so much. Thank you to everybody that presented and great questions. See you all next time.
Thank you, everyone, for your work. Be well.
Bye-bye. Take care.
you.
Bye.